So in this video, I'm going to go over a couple of things. One is this is sort of like a new base project, and so what's in it? So it's set up for Vite, ArcGIS Core, which will get us Calcite anyway, and that set up for Calcite IntelliSense ahead of time. Some CDN links in the index HTML, a custom logger which I'll go over in that. Just because you might see it in future examples and wonder, hey, where is that coming from? And also Vite config to automatically open a browser tab when you run the dev. And also workers set up in, I guess, ECMAScript format versus ADM. And so if we're going to develop in this ECMAScript mode using imports in that, then how do you actually do the worker part as well in that? So that's just some of the tweaks that have been done to this base. Maybe I'll eventually put it up onto GitHub as something you can download as a starter in that. But we'll get in here. Not much in the index HTML except some H1 tags and H2 tags to basically say, hey, check developer tools to see what's going on in that. And so we'll go back to main.js because there were a lot of actions happening in that. And so we do have this import logger and turn debugging on. So I mean, you're writing code a lot and you get frustrated and you just wanted to be able to log things out. Didn't want to get involved if it was me having to make a decision on, hey, it's a string, use log, hey, it's an object, use dir, and that, and then instances where you want to turn all the debugging off. Say something slows down. Well, is that just the process, or is that all the debugging I'm doing? And quickly turn debugging on and off. And so this is the little custom logger. It's just a lot of stuff to do with console logging in that. Now, if you send in log, I'll do it for you. Whether it's a simple object, we just use log to put it out. But if it's a complex object, then we will use dir in that. And I also have a little message like, hey, I detected an object, so I'm using logger is using dir instead. Also, if you do send in a warning, we'll use the built-in console.warn. So that changes the message color in the developer tools and also the associated icon and that kind of stuff in that. And anything else? Yes, some simple functions for toggling debug. If it was on, it's off. If it was off, it's on. Wanted to flip it to on, one to flip it on to off. Wanted to figure out what is its state in that. So just some simple stuff to streamline the whole debugging via the console log dir warn features that are built into developer tools in that. Now this is where we're going to introduce worker and that, and so you can see a statement here, import a worker. You see a strange syntax, and we should go over this. In the end, this is the location and name of the file. You don't put the .js in. And this is, by the way, hey, this is a worker file. Now this syntax you see on line 22 is a Vite thing, right? Vite has to deal with the reality down over here that it might actually look like this, right? Where it has to make a new URL and that, and then set the type to module and that kind of stuff. And so they give you a more, I guess, streamlined syntax, and they'll do this work for you in the background. But if you're going to do this raw, 100% JavaScript vanilla, then your line for that import would look a little bit different in that. So this is more of a convenience thing for developers. They think, trying to get into their heads, which is always a dangerous thing. I think they're trying to streamline the import process so the importing always looks the same and that, instead of different. Hey, if it's a style, do it this way. Hey, if it's a worker, do it this other technique. So this is trying to clean all that up for you in that, which is nice in that. Here you see me turn debugging on my logger, and here you see me logging out messages in that. So this is going to be our first worker, and this is going to be, in all honesty, as bare bones as you can get, just to go over some simple stuff that although the JavaScript Maps SDK or ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript has a built-in framework for working with workers to try to make it easier. What happens on the ECMAScript side is it gets a little bit more complicated when you look on GitHub and having to use rollup to build your workers separately. Now Vite has a bunch of stuff built in to help with workers and that. It needs a little bit of help here too. This is one of the things, like I said, is this little line here is magic in that, so that you can do a Vite. We can run it no problem, but we need to be able to build it and then build a preview. And then that preview should run in a browser. And so they're going to take care of some stuff about how exactly do you want to do this build. ECMAScript, which is what we're doing, or do you want to, another choice is AMD, kind of loading technique in that, where you're pulling in like some other library to do the import. But we don't need to because we're using imports in that. A big thing is that if you want to hear what the worker's doing, then you got to listen to it. It might make sense in real life, right? So we have to add an event listener and listen for messages. It can also send error messages, and there's also something called error message as well in that. So a big thing is, if we don't listen to our worker, and we don't have to, because you might have a case where the worker's just got to go off and do work. You don't need to hear what they're doing, and you don't need anything back at the end. In that, you could just launch your worker, and you don't need lines 38, 39. But if you want that ability to say, hey, what's going on? And the worker answer you, or have your application talking to the worker, because they are running on different threads. And that's a meme you might see that I posted earlier, right? You know, you can build any web app out there with just one thread. And the reason that is because, well, you don't really have a choice. I mean, JavaScript is a one thread deal, unless you use workers and pop them on other threads. Now, the popping them on other threads, the browsers take care of. But when you're doing workers, what you're trying to do is not make the thread that you are on, which is typically where your user interface is, busy. So a term you'll hear is janking, where the interface freezes for a second because it got so busy doing work. So what we do is, if we think we're in one of those scenarios, then you spin up a worker, do the work over on the worker, and that. Now in that case, if it's work that your app needed, it probably needs the results. So you probably are going to have to tie into the message system. Now if you use the framework that ESRI provides, it doesn't look like this, but under the hood it is. I mean, under the hood, this is what workers do. You send messages, you post messages in that, and then you respond to a message coming back to you. And so this is us on line 38 responding to the worker sending a message to us. Now to send a message, right, whoever wants to send a message, posts a message, right? So if I'm sending a message to the worker, I post. And if the worker is going to send a message back to me, it posts. And both of us have to be listening for messages coming in. And so on a message coming in, right, that sort of thing. And so that's how the mechanism works. And it's pretty simple. That's how it's done, right? It's just post message on message, and that's how things start to happen. And that. So let's go look at our worker, and that. And so if we go in here, this one here, into my source folder, it just sends a message back. Hey, you actually made it into the worker. And that's like the first part of debugging, right? Did we actually get in there? And that sort of thing. It doesn't feel like we actually got in there. And that's all our worker is. It's some JavaScript file. All it says is, hey, I'm going to send a message back to whoever created to me, right? That, hey, you made it here. In that. So this is just, laying the foundation for basic communication. Again, if you want to send a message, you post one, right? But if no one's listening, then no one's going to hear it. So you have to hook in, right? Add an event listener that on message, right? So, and this will be, basically this gets hooked to post message. So when they send a post message, you'll hear an event pop on this message function. And right now our function is just going to log out the message. And if there's an error, we'll log that out. We're not going to get error in this case in that. But the big thing is that you have to import your worker, like I did here. You can then create it in that. And then the workers create it, waiting for people to send it messages, and it has the ability to send you messages back as well. But you're not going to hear the messages unless you listen. And that. And then a little thing, who's going to win first, right? Who's going to, like, are we going to see the workers' message first, or will we see, our message first? And so let's just fire it up and see. And after inspecting the console, we will probably, right? It's popped on another screen over here. I'll bring it across in that. So I'll inspect and go to the console. And we can see, debugging logging is now on. The worker was created. Who will win? See, our code won, right? So in that. So what you have to realize is the couple milliseconds or more that it takes to create the worker, fire it up, right, and have it send the message, your code's done. That sort of thing. And so your code gets ahead. And so that's in that. But you do have, your app is still alive and it's still hooked into the listening structure. So it's listening to any post messages coming in and that. And then the logger says, look, object detected by logger using jar instead. So it popped out this event, right? So the thing is, what gets sent back to you is an event and buried inside that event, right? So this is how they talk. There's events, it's these event messages going back all the time between the worker on the second thread and your app on the main thread. It's the main thread to you, and that lots of threads happening on the system overall with all the other applications that are running. But that's the two of you talking to each other, and you talk through these event messages. And if you're going to send data back, it'll be buried inside the event. And if you see, if you look down here, the key thing you look for is this data inside worker, right? Now. And it said inside message, and let's go back to our code, right? Let's go into the worker. So self post, right? So the data that was sent back is inside message. The one thing to realize here is that you could, between these parentheses, you can almost send anything back. If you have a very complicated object, you might have to what we call flatten it or JSON.stringify it to send it back. And that the two threads can't share the same object or variables, but you can always quickly take your variable, turn it into JSON, send it across, kind of concept. So the concept in here is, because you'll see next in future videos that sort of tie into this, that okay, we can get very sophisticated in what we send back. We just don't have to send back just a string, right? I don't offend the string, but a dumb string, and that we can send back a JavaScript object that's quite highly organized, but it doesn't mean the person at the other end has to understand that structure and how to tear it apart and that sort of stuff. So we can send very sophisticated things back. Here's just a simple message going back, but where's it going to be? It's going to be in the event.data, all right? Whatever you put in the parentheses here, right, will show up on the other side in event data. I'm trying to get to my window. There it is. So it'll come back to this event message here in the .data and then inside worker, right? So, but that could be another object, right? Just so you know, it's just a string right now. It could be a number. We're going to get to the level where we're going to have to send a fancy JavaScript object back just because we're going to have lots of different type of messages, right? Some of them will be informational in that. Some of them might be a warning. Some of them might be could be the concept of progress, right? So we want to build in the concept of the ability to say, how's it going? Oh, about 25% done, right? And that sort of thing. And so we want to but we need to be able to distinguish between those messages. It's just informational. Hey, we're firing up, cracking features and stuff like that. And so if you ever ran geoprocessing tools in Pro or something like that, you would have seen all the different messages that pop up while it's geoprocessing, and then eventually it finishes. And then want to send a note, hey, we actually got through all the processing successful, and then we need some trigger to say, hey, this is the actual data coming back, right? So we got to say, have some way of triggering hey, this isn't progress, which would be a number. This isn't some informational message. This is not a warning. This isn't, hey, process is actually complete. This is the actual data or the result coming back. So we'll build towards that and that, but we just want to go over workers, right? And that. And so And plus we're in this Vite ECMA 6 module type of world, and so the syntax for import a little different, that sort of thing. But it really is, when you look at a raw web worker, if you need to talk to the worker, right? Like I said, if the worker just has to do work, just go off and do the work, right? But if you actually need something back from the process, or if you need to figure out, hey, where are you? Then you need to be hook into the event listener post message on message concept, and that way you can start communicating. You and your worker can talk to each other if that's important. The big thing would be, if there's ever going to be data coming back, then you have to do this, right? This is the only way to get the data back, and that sort of thing. And so we're just going to use, instead of using the framework, because it does complicate the build process a little bit, not impossible, but it does get into some heavier weight stuff. We'll just drop down to the raw mechanism of how workers work, and it's through this post message and then on message. So you post a message, and on a message coming in, I can get what you posted, and that's how they talk to each other. And then it's up to you. And this gets into a concept of JavaScript being Play-Doh, right? It's up to you to figure out, well, how do you want that to happen, right? They build the underlying, hey, it could be as simple as just send message, post message, and they can talk to each other, done, right? And so the worker interface is pretty simple. But then it's up to you. Well, this, you don't just have to send a string back and that sort of thing. So I think we'll leave it here. That goes over the basics. There's a little bit of syntactic sugar to do the imports. The worker itself, communicates with post message, also on message. We'll see that in a future video. It has to do something similar to listen for messages that you're sending. But if you want to post it, if you want to send a message, you post a message in. It needs to be listening for you sending messages in that. So once all that's hooked up, hey, I'm listening to you, you're listening to me, and then we start posting back and forth to each other. And then we can figure out, what's going on. So that's all for now.